Hello.
Hello, how are you today?
I'm very, very well. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thank you. Thank you. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too. Who are you?
Who are you? My name's Chris.
Chris. My name's Leon.
Leon. Nice to meet you, Leon. Where'd you grow up?
I grew up in London.
Right in the city?
Yeah, just outside the city. What about you?
I used to live in Crystal Palace, and my daughter was a professor in East London a little bit at Queen Mary, kind of interesting part of the city. But and I'm going to be in London in a couple of weeks, actually. But very nice to meet you, Leon.
Amazing. So you lived in Crystal Palace, which means that, are you a Crystal Palace fan?
No, I didn't live there long enough. I'm Canadian, actually, and so I'm a fan of Canadian. What do I have here handy to show you? I'm a fan of the Toronto Maple Leafs. In fact,
and you get your coffee from Tim Hortons.
Yeah, that's no matter where I travel. Yeah, we have Tim Hortons coffee. And you don't know who I am, right?
I have absolutely no idea. Although I will say that behind you, I think, is a book that says Apollo.
Correct. Good eyeballs. Yeah, I think my camera's got those things. And I've got Canadian flags behind me there also, dead giveaway. Pictures of my wife and my kids. And this is a Royal Canadian Air Force crest right here. So that's I've got my whole biography on the wall behind me here, it turns out. But yes, I'm an author. Okay,
great. So what type of books do you write? I feel the beauty of this little podcast is clearly my team don't tell me anything.
Yeah.
And I'm probably going to be completely embarrassed when you tell me who you are. But what type of things do you write?
Well, I wrote this book, which is called An Astronaut's Guide to Life on Earth. And I wrote this book, which is images of the Earth that I've taken out of the 45,000 pictures of the world that I've taken. These are the best 100. And this is a children's book that I wrote called The Darkest Dark, about how not to be afraid. And then the latest book that I wrote that's sort of out of focus behind me is a fiction book, a fiction thriller book, which is a whole new departure for me. And it's international bestseller, but which I'm delighted to be able to say. And it just came out a few weeks ago, The Apollo Murders.
Okay, Chris, I think I know. You were an astronaut.
Correct. I was an astronaut for 21 years. I served with, I'm Canadian, so Canadian Space Agency, but I was a NASA astronaut for 21 years. And I served in Russia for about 5 years as an astronaut. And I flew the space shuttle as part of the flight crew twice. And then I was the pilot of a Russian rocket ship on my third space flight, and helped build two different space stations, and then lived in space all told for about half a year.
Chris, if my producer was here right now, I would give him the biggest hug in the history of hugs. Because I tell you something, I am so fascinated by space travel. And the fact that I get an opportunity to speak to you, who has clearly done a lot, first of all, what does it feel like when you see Earth from space? I know that's one of your books. In fact, I have that.
Oh, cool. My first launch was on a space shuttle called Atlantis. We launched out of Florida, and we were going up to the Russian space station Mir to go help build it. We had some big pieces in the payload bay of the shuttle. And so we launch out of Florida, but to get into the same orbit as Mir, it doesn't go around the equator, it's tipped. And so we launched up the east coast of the States. And so if you think about it, Leon, if you launch up the east coast of the States and you're in sort of a hula hoop kind of orbit, then your orbit is going to sort of curve across the North Atlantic when it reaches its northernmost. And then the place that I first saw the world, by the time our engines had shut off and I unstrapped out of my seat and I gently and weightlessness pulled myself to the window and looked at the world, the first place I saw was London, where you're from. Looking down on the south of England and across at Cork and the south of Ireland and over to the right, you could see all the way basically from Stockholm to Rome, just in one glance, with the Alps right there. So to go from lying on your back in Florida and essentially a dozen minutes later to be able to see from Scandinavia to the Mediterranean with all that history of London below you, it overwhelms you. You can look all you want, but you just don't have the capacity to see enough. It's just amazing. So you would love that perspective. And I've been lucky enough to go around the world 2,650 times and counting.
Well, I've only ever done one circumnavigation of the Earth, so that's pretty impressive. What inspired you to want to be an astronaut? I mean, kids, what do you want to be? Oh, I want to be an astronaut, right? Like me, I love space. I love the thought of traveling through galaxies. I mean, it's just beyond me. I sometimes sit at home in the night and I look at the stars and I'm like, what is going on? What on earth is going on? But you took something that happened to you as a kid and actually became an astronaut. How did that happen?
I grew up on a farm, and so I had a lot of night sky. And so part of it was just an awareness of the immensity of everything and the tininess of the world. But I think the bigger part of it, Leon, was I liked reading comic books and I liked reading science fiction books. Jules Verne and Arthur C. Clarke and Edgar Rice Burroughs and gosh, all of the good writers, Robert Heinlein and all of them. And then I watched Star Trek on television. I'm the right age to have watched Star Trek when it first came out. And then, growing up on a farm, going to a movie theater was a big deal. And one of my school buds had a birthday, and we went to see 2001: A Space Odyssey in the theater when I was, 8 or 9 or something. And all of those things just sort of exploded my head. Like, wow, all of this stuff is out there and our imaginations are taking us there. But maybe what set me aside from the kids that you talk to is that I watched the real people flying in space at the same time. It took that fantasy science fiction stuff and real people, Yuri Gagarin and Valentina Tereshkova and Al Shepard and John Glenn and Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin. They were actually flying in space. And right about the time, people often say you are what you were when you were 10 years old. Right at the time I was 10 years old, the first 2 people walked on the moon. And I just thought, if that is a career option, that's what I want to do. How do you do that? I'm a little kid from a farm in Canada. We don't have NASA. We don't have a space agency. We don't have rockets, but hey, they didn't used to have those things either. And things are going to change. So I want to start turning myself into an astronaut right now. And that's what inspired me, but that's also that what set me on the path to flying in space 3 times.
What was it like? I'm going to tell you a secret, which I've never told anyone. Sometimes in order to go to bed, I pretend, I'm talking about like 2 nights ago, I pretend that I am, I pretend that I'm in a rocket ship and I'm about to fly to like the furthest reaches of the galaxy. And there's something about space travel. There's something about understanding what on earth is happening. Like the moon. What is the moon? Like, we see the moon every day, but sorry, what is the moon?
Yep.
Yeah. It's
Isn't it funny that you express it as what on earth is happening? It's like what isn't on earth that's happening. But my brother and I used to do the same thing, Leon. We had on the farm there, we had beds in the same big bedroom. And at nighttime, both of us in our individual beds would bring our knees up in the covers. So it formed sort of like an instrument panel in front of us. And then we would go, he was a couple of years younger than I was, and I would be the commander. And we would go on space missions every night before bed because it opened up your mind to dream, to imagine all of this stuff. Because all you had to do was walk outside and look up and realize, just the immensity of opportunity that exists out there, and how almost everything that exists isn't here on Earth. It's all out there. And so, you asked what it's like. It's better than I dreamed it would be when I was that teenager pretending with my brother that I could fly in space. And it's easy to say it's better. I've thought about why was it better, and I think it's because, number one, you're weightless, and weightlessness, it's the stuff of dreams, but it's more like, in fact, a superpower. If I could make you weightless right now so that you could effortlessly just fly about the room, or you could push off with one hand and fly across the city. That's what weightlessness is like. You now are an X-Man, so that's cool. And then you're going around the world at an incredible speed so that you can stay in orbit, 5 miles a second, 28,000 kilometers an hour, 25 times the speed of sound. So you cross the US in 9 minutes from LA to New York, 9 minutes, around the world in 90 minutes. So you get looking out the window while you're floating weightless, the whole world, and the angle because of the speed between you and the sun and the world is changing. So the shadows are moving, and the colors and the textures of it. It's just gobsmackingly, generously beautiful all the time. And I don't know if you're a surfer, a body surfer. You must have tried it at some point. But that moment when you're paddling and the waves coming, and sometimes you paddle like crazy and you miss the wave. But sometimes if you paddle just right, you catch the wave. And I don't know anything about you. Maybe you're the world champion surfer, but you catch the wave. And now there's that wonderful feeling of being carried along, partially because of your own skill, but by the momentum of something way bigger than yourself that is really kind of magnificent. And when you're working a spaceship, it's hard and complicated, and there's a million things going on, but you've worked so long that now you can actually get ahead of it and catch that wave. And with each little success, you sort of feel that building momentum. And so that combination of weightlessness and a wild view and being part of something magnificent, that you're contributing to, I just found it intoxicating and addictive, and better than I dreamed it would be.
The whole time you were sharing that story, there were goosebumps, chills, The
whole time in space, you have goosebumps and chills. It's a great experience.
I mean, how do you have that type of experience and then come home and live like everyone else? I mean, I asked that question because when I travel on Earth, I have these amazing experiences, and I come home and I feel like I'm discombobulated. I'm not fully present. My mind is somewhere else. I've had this high. I come back to everyday life. But to go to space, and you said you spent half a year in space, to go to space and spend half a year in space and then come home. I mean, honestly, I'd be like, just send me back, please. Just let me go and live in space forever.
Well, I don't know what's the most, you probably can't even answer the question, but what's one of the most delicious foods you've ever eaten in your whole life, Leon?
Cinnamon salted ice cream.
Okay, yeah, that's delicious. I like sort of a caramel pecan ice cream, but cinnamon salted ice cream. And it exists, right? And you can actually right now imagine how that tastes in your mouth, and the richness and the creaminess of it and the wonder of it, and the fact, that it's out there somewhere in the universe and you've experienced it. But that doesn't mean that other food isn't delicious or that, you can't live the rest of your life or something. It's just one of the known delights that has turned you into who you are today, right? And so I've just had this wild richness of, the ice cream experience that, but it just colors my whole perception of everything. I've seen the whole world in such rich detail. I have a personal experience with, thousands and thousands of very fast sunsets and sunrises that by rights I should never have seen. And all of that stuff's inside me. And so I just find it makes me feel larger than I would if I hadn't had that experience, maybe like ice cream, but it makes me feel richer and deeper and more appreciative than if I hadn't had that experience. And yeah, I guess I could be bitter about it. I could be like, oh man, I got to do something great. And now I'm not doing the great thing anymore. And so my life sucks. But I look at it the other way around. It's like, man, I've done some great stuff and I've got the whole rest of my life to think about what that means to me. And maybe I'll, play music about it or write books about it or talk about it or, teach about it or whatever. And so I do all those things. And to me, it's just, it's like this marvelous chord that I've been privy to. And it tends to, soundtrack my whole life.
Wow. Have you ever done a spacewalk?
Yeah, I've done two. I was Canada's first spacewalker. In fact, we made a new $5 bill to commemorate it, and I got to unveil. It's a blue bill. Canada, we have plastic money, and I'll look in my wallet while we're talking. They made a bill commemorate. Oh yeah, here it is. You can't probably see it, but on the back of this bill, there's a spacewalker on the Canadian 5. And, I got to unveil, and there's the big Canadian robot arm that's on the space station. And I got to unveil this bill. And the Bank of Canada has asked me to sign a lot of, and a lot of people ask me to sign $5 bills a lot. Yeah. So it's a wild experience. I did 2 spacewalks and spent about, if you total, I'm about 15 hours outside. So that's 10 times around the world while I was outside by myself. Hands down, coolest experience of my whole life.
Please explain how that felt.
It starts, well, I trained for it for years and had to invent the spacewalk. You don't just randomly go out for spacewalks, but it finally comes down to the day you're going to do a spacewalk and putting on that huge white spacesuit. I don't think there's one in the shelves behind me, but putting on that huge white spacesuit is super. Now I don't even have a picture of it. Super uncomfortable and bulky, and it weighs more than you do. But it's your little one-person spaceship. We call it a spacesuit, but it's a one-person spaceship is what it is, custom fit to your body. And you depressurize in the airlock. It gets quieter and quieter until there's no sound but your own breathing. And then I was the first one out to hatch. So you turn this knob, you pull this hatch out of the way, and then there's the universe out, through this hole. And grab on with both hands and pull yourself out. And imagine this next time you're in a toilet stall. Imagine, you're sitting in a public toilet stall or something, you know what that confine feels like. Imagine if when you open the toilet stall, you're now standing on top of Mount Everest. And you're like, put the toilet stall back again and go out. It's like, how can these two things be next to each other? To have been inside the confines of the airlock in the spaceship and now to be out 3-dimensionally in the universe where the Earth is now in the distance. It's separate from you. You don't even, every time you've looked at space, whether you're imagining it before going to sleep or go out in the yard, you are in your mama's lap, right? You're in Mother Earth's lap looking at the universe. But now suddenly you're looking back at the world, and the world is kind of a shocker because now it's a planet. It's like looking at the moon or whatever. It's not even where you are anymore. And you don't feel like an earthling anymore. You feel psychologically separate from that part of your life. And so it's overwhelmingly profound. And you got a million things to do, and you're busy and working, and the suit's super hard on your body. You come out of the suit bloody because it beats you up. And I had a lot of problems during my spacewalks that we had to deal with. We triumphed eventually over everything, but it was wicked. But it changed my perception of the three-dimensionality of the universe and of our place in it, forever. And I think it should. That an experience like that, it's the rarest of all human experiences. There are way, way more people have won Nobel Prizes than have done spacewalks. It's brand new. And to see the world that way, I'm talking a lot, but the coolest moment was we were coming south of Australia in the dark, and just south of Tasmania, south of Hobart there. And we went through the aurora while I was outside. We went through the southern lights. They were like rippling around the ship and pouring between my legs. And they're mostly green and red, but with your naked eyeball, you can see other trace gases that are fluorescing there. So there's other colors. And I could not believe my luck. How did I get here? How did my life? And sure, I worked my whole life and, had some luck and took a lot of chances, but to have been there, to have been surfing on the aurora, just phenomenal experience.
This is one of the happiest moments of my life. And I'm not joking. I'm serious. I'm not joking. I've had many really good moments, but this is literally one of the happiest moments of my life. When you just told me that you were inside the northern lights, the aurora lights,
the southern lights, the aurora australis,
southern lights, and you're like sitting there in a spaceship, and the southern lights are like right here in front of your face, and you're feeling them and you're seeing them and you're being touched by them. I'm sorry. I mean, it does not get better than, it's just beyond my understanding, my capacity to understand. I mean, it is like the most unbelievable experience. And I'm just experiencing it through you telling me. I'm telling you, if I had that experience, I think I don't know what would happen to me.
Well, this is the quandary that I faced, Leon. When you come back from that experience, what do you just keep it to yourself? That would just seem like such a jealous and selfish waste, So how do you share it? And it's part of the reason that I decided I'm going to write a fiction book, just because if you're writing a factual book of ideas, you got to be sort of clinical about it. You can't be super imaginative, poetic. But when you write a fiction book, then you can tell, how did this feel for this character? And what was this person thinking about? And you can get the randomness of all the human reaction and the rawness of it and the imperfection of it, that when you're writing fact, you got to describe it a different way. And there's a lot of really bad stuff happens in the Apollo murders, but also there's spacewalking and moonwalking, and it allowed me to retell the story sort of in a real out there way that I've been trying. When I'm telling you about it with words, it's okay, and I could show you some video of it, and that's okay. But making it into a story where you're really involved already, like you're in a dream, and now this happens in your dream, then hopefully, if I've written the book well enough, hopefully it becomes even more real for you.
So you're telling me that you have video of the southern lights inside your spaceship? Sorry.
Yeah, we do. Yeah. Not while I was out on a spacewalk, not that particular moment, but the ship is always the space station where there's, 7 people. We've been living there for 21 years, and you see the aurora all the time, every night. And you get 16 sunrises and 16 sunsets a day. If you think about it, the sun is shining on one side of the world and the other side's dark. So you're always going in and out of darkness. And when you're in the darkness and you're anywhere near the poles, you can see the southern lights or the northern lights. And if the sun's been super busy and has made the lights, the magnetic field strong enough, then, well, not really the magnetic field, but anyway, the impact of it strong enough, then the lights will reach all the way to the spaceship. And then if you set up the camera properly, you can actually do sequential still and make a video of it going by. And that's what we do. And so, yeah, you just need to Google or go to YouTube or something and put in, Aurora or Northern Lights space station, and you'll be able to see what I saw and felt.
Wow. I mean, I honestly wasn't up there, clearly. But the way you explained it to me, I'm literally never going to forget it. And that's the truth. I'm just never going to forget that moment. You had the experience, but the moment where you explained it to me is going to be with me forever. And I've had a lot of really cool moments, but this is one of those moments that is going to stay with me. I felt like I was with you. It's weird.
Well, I'm glad if I'm using words in a good enough way that I can, compel you to imagine it clearly, then that's great. And, that's why I've done a lot. I've tried to, I've hosted several TV shows. I did one for the BBC, and I helped create and host one with Will Smith for National Geographic and some other ones, and written the books and done a master class and, done a bunch of things just to try and not keep it to myself, to try and because it's so rare. Other people should be able to somehow get it inside of them so they can then choose what they want to do, And so I talk to a lot of young people as well in the various things that I do, because I want them to even have a richer view and more choices than I had, in the things that they're planning to do with their lives.
Keep sharing it. Keep sharing it, because this kid, me, is never going to forget what you said. So I have a question which I'm sure you've been asked many, many, many times, but I have to ask you. Have you ever had an experience with an extraterrestrial being?
Nobody has. A categorical answer. Nobody has. We are looking like crazy. And I'm sure there'll be people who are watching this and say, oh, NASA made him say that. I'm Canadian. NASA can't tell me what to do. Who's going to tell me what to say? And think about it on the flip side. If I saw an alien, I mean, why would I keep that to myself? And think how huge the space budget would be if we actually were encountering aliens. It doesn't make any sense that we would make it a secret. And it's kind of one of the fundamental reasons we're going to space, to try and answer your question. What, when you look up at the night sky, what on earth is going on? What is that? What is the moon? What's out there? We have a thing driving around on Mars right now that's drilling. It's an international thing run by NASA. It's a big rover called Perseverance and a little helicopter called Ingenuity. But we think this used to be like a delta where water flowed and then it opened. So when water is carrying sediment and bits, as soon as it spreads, at the mouth of a river, then the sediment falls out, because the water slows down and opens up. And so we have this old delta on Mars, and we're drilling into that delta right now, because if there were fossils or little beings, maybe they fell out and we can find fossils on Mars, because that would answer your question. All we need to find is one primitive fossil on Mars, and we know that there's and maybe it's possible that life got between Mars and the Earth. Yeah, that's a bit of it. It's possible, sure, but it's a huge stretch. If we can find like one little flower fossil or anything on Mars, then that'll answer your question. And we're looking at planets that are orbiting other suns, and we're listening for radio waves. And we've been broadcasting radio waves for a couple hundred years now, but we just don't know the answer to your question. Are we alone or not? And there's people that see, like those recent Navy heads-up display tapes where you see something in a heads-up display tape that you don't understand what it is. I mean, I was I used to be a Navy fighter pilot. And before that, or after that, I was a test pilot. I've spent a decade of my life flying high performance jets with heads up displays. And my dad's an airline pilot, and my brothers are airline pilots. You know, my particular family has spent hundreds of thousands of hours, you know, up at the high ends of the atmosphere. And so to have people say, yes, but I saw on YouTube this video from a heads-up display, and it showed a thing that I didn't understand. So therefore, that has to be intelligent life from another galaxy or solar system or something. That's just, you know, as much as I wish that were true, it's just, you know, kind of fun, wishful thinking. And I got nothing against UFOs. That's fun. You know, it's good. It's entertaining. It helps people imagine, and it's cool. But unfortunately, the harsh evidence is we have never seen life anywhere but Earth. But man, we're looking.
Tell me, I'm going to ask you a question that I don't think is answerable, but if anyone can answer it, it's you and a few others. When we look up at the sky, specifically at night, we see the stars. What is going on? What is happening? What on earth, again, I use on earth, but what is going on? Please answer me that question. What the hell is happening?
We're only just starting to nibble at the, you know, that's a really profound question, Leon. And people have been wondering for years, for thousands, tens of thousands of years. I picture, you know, when the first hunter-gatherers 200,000 years ago, when they were out at night and looking up and going, what is going on? What is that? What am I looking at? And that's why we invented, you know, signs of the zodiac and named the constellations, because we were just trying to explain it to ourselves, to make it somehow familiar and explicable and not just endless and scary. And what do you do when there's an eclipse and the sun goes out? You know, what's going on there? Or the moon disappears for a little while or something. But in 1604 or something, someone took two pieces. We learned how to grind glass for the first time. Our metallurgy and everything got good enough. And Galileo took two pieces of glass down a long tube, and he started seeing moons around other planets. And he really thought, holy cow, we're not the center of the universe. If there are moons going around other planets, everybody thought we were the center of everything. We're not. And every telescope we've been built since then was to try and answer your question, right through to the Hubble telescope, which is the greatest one we've ever built, or the James Webb, which is just about to launch in a few months. We're just trying to answer that question. And we only know, this is the part most people don't have at their fingertips, perhaps. We only know what 6% of the universe is made of. Because of the clear evidence we have, we can't even account for 94% of what's going on. And so we call it dark matter and dark energy because we don't know. We could have called it, you know, Chris and Leon. We just don't know what it is. And so, and black holes, we just imaged the stuff that's pouring into a black hole for the first time a couple of years ago. We just measured our very first gravity wave just a few years ago with a big experiment we've built. And all of that work is just to try and understand, how does all this even happen? How does this work? Where does the world come from? Where is it going? You know, how come it took so long for life to develop here, or at least our type of life? What's on those other stars out there? How far am I looking back in time? You know, when I look at something, am I looking at now, or am I looking at something that took 1 billion years to get here? You know, it stretches our even fundamental imagination, let alone comprehension. So I think it's an important question to ask. And then maybe more even importantly, it's a question to try and answer in every limited step that we can take. And that's part of the other reason that I decided to be a space explorer and an astronaut and to, you know, write about it, is to try and do my little bit to nibble away at some of the tiny pieces of trying to answer that huge question.
I literally I think you're going to be very glad that you weren't stuck on a plane next to me for 27 hours, because literally we could go on forever. We can't go on forever, but we could go on forever. So I have another question for you. I always ask this question, and I know that pretty much no one can answer it, but I'm going to ask you. If I'm standing at this point that I'm at right now, and I go upwards 700 billion, trillion, gillion, bazillion, vivillion light years, where am I going to end?
A light year, obviously, for folks, it seems self-evident, but some people don't know, is the distance light travels in a year. Light goes unbelievably fast. If you're using old units, 186,000 miles a second. 186,000 miles a second. So if you think, wow, what's 186,000 miles? The Earth's only 25,000 miles around. So life goes around the world, what is that? 7.5 times a second. And so how far could light go in a year? That's a light year. And yet there are stars that are billions of light years away from us that the Hubble telescope and other telescopes can see. And when we start looking at those things that are, when you look at something where the light took 1 billion years, because it's 1 billion light years, that means that the light we're seeing actually got emitted by that star 1 billion years ago, right? And we have ways of measuring it so that we can actually see some of the earliest light that existed in the universe from, around 14 billion years ago. Beyond that, we can't see anything because there's no light. And when you're just looking at pure darkness, there's nothing to see. So that doesn't mean there's nothing out there. It's just because things are, it's like if you're in a super dark street and there's no lights, it's only the one light coming that you can actually focus on. So the answer to your question, I guess, is depending how many billions of light years you traveled, mostly you would be out in the middle of nowhere. There are galaxies, which are collections of millions or billions of stars, like ours, the Milky Way, or the Andromeda galaxy, or all those other galaxies are out there. But there are billions of galaxies, but there's way more space in between the galaxies than there are galaxies themselves. Space is mostly completely empty. So if you were to randomly go out 13 billion light years in any direction, you would probably be in some eternal empty void with an enormous distance to the nearest tiny bit of matter, But what lies beyond that? Nobody knows the answer to that question. What happened before the Big Bang? No one.
I was about to ask you that. I was about to say, what happened 1 second before the Big Bang?
Well, I got to talk to Stephen Hawking about it. Of course, talking with Stephen Hawking, he was so debilitated that, you basically have to wait for his thoughts to get tapped out with his flicking eyelid. But I got to study a little bit under Stephen Hawking. But talking to some of the leading physicists of the world, talk to, Brian Cox or Kip Thorne or those guys, and they all have different theories. They have bets. It's just like, if you're in a fantasy league and you're betting, how are the Eagles going to do this year? Those guys live in a different fantasy league, and they're betting on, what happened just before the Big Bang, and what did the universe? How can you visualize that? And what goes on beyond an event horizon and all those other things? And I don't understand it at all. I'm not a physicist. I'm an engineer, test pilot, astronaut, but they have lots of theories, but absolutely nobody knows. And nobody even knows how to prove it. The mathematics show different things, but that doesn't give us any sort of evidentiary proof, and I don't know how we're going to answer that question. Maybe the huge experiment that's mounted on the top of the space station, which is collecting the particles that are smaller than atoms, the subatomic particles from all of those stars out in the universe. It's called the alpha magnetic spectrometer. Maybe it will answer the question. Maybe it'll get down to the fundamental nature of matter and the universe. I don't know. Or maybe we'll find it in a particle accelerator, or maybe some brilliant whiz kid is sitting, in front of his laptop right now, somewhere around the world, and sorting out the answer to that question. But for now, you and I are groping in the dark. We don't know.
We don't know. So let's bring ourselves back from space down to Earth. And let me ask you a question. How can what you learnt up there help us down here?
It's a question I ask myself all the time, because am I just going for a joyride? You know, it costs the Canadian taxpayer a fortune to train me and trust me to go do a good job. And so, you know, every astronaut carries an enormous sense of public trust with them to do this job as well as possible. And so I look at, what are we getting out of this? The answer comes in a bunch of different levels. Fundamentally, obviously, the answer is increased understanding of everything. How does physics behave? You know, how do these things actually all work? Part of it is understanding the experiments that we run on the space station. We run like a couple hundred all the time. You know, human physiology, when you take away gravity, and you know, looking at the universe. There's just constant science questions being answered, and actually measuring the world is a huge answer to the question. Because let's say you and I said, "Hey, I think Greenland is melting because of change in the climate. So am I right or am I wrong?" It's really difficult to tell from where you and I are sitting to answer that question. Even if we decided we were going to charter a boat and travel to Greenland, it would still be really hard to answer the question, because we're going to be on a boat next to one little tiny piece of Greenland. But if you could put, you know, a satellite as big as my teacup with a really the right sensor on the end and have it fly over Greenland 16 times a day, and then you maybe get a dozen of those, you can measure exactly how much ice is in Greenland down to, you know, really tight numbers every single day from now on. And so now we can actually go, oh, this is the actual truth about the temperature of the oceans, or the salinity of the oceans, or the height of the oceans, or, you know, taken the temperature of the world. And so one of the big benefits we have from space travel and the space station is actually being able to understand the natural cycles of our planet, and then try and figure out, okay, those are the things the planet does naturally. Now, what's caused by 8 billion of us exhaling and lighting fires and flushing the toilet? You know, what's our piece of this? So that's a big piece. And then maybe the last thing is I set this book, The Apollo Murders, obviously back in the Apollo era. But when the first guys went to the moon at Christmas of 1968, the Apollo 8 crew, when they were coming around the backside of the moon, one of them grabbed the camera and was hoping that, you know, he'd get the azimuth right and everything. And the Earth popped into view. And he grabbed this picture, and it was, for the very first time in human history, someone had seen an Earth rise. And the Earth was suddenly, you could cover it up with your thumb. And it was tiny, and it was beautiful and jewel-like and separate, you know, inside the eternity of the deadly blackness that lies around it. And it was the cradle of all life that we know of, and keeping us all alive. And I think people started to realize we're actually on a spaceship, you know, and it's got nice life support systems that are keeping us alive, but we only got one. And we're all breathing out of one bubble of air. And if the Earth were this big, that bubble of air would be thinner than a coat of paint. You know, our air is so incredibly thin, and we're all in this together. And that picture that Bill Anders took on Apollo 8, it was the acknowledged kickoff of so much of the environmental awareness that is now we all just sort of take for granted, because suddenly we saw the reality of our world. And it's easy to delude yourself if you just stay in one little bit of the surface and somehow extrapolate that into thinking the whole world is this way, or the world is infinite, or we don't have to worry about anything. And I think that space scientific and analytic, but also philosophic perspective, those are, to me, the big reasons that we're doing these things.
And I would say that on a much smaller scale, but when you travel out of your city, you get more perspective. when you travel out of your country, you get more perspective. When you travel out of your planet, you get more perspective, right?
Yeah. Yeah, it's fundamentally way easier to hate a group of people that you've never met, because it's just arbitrary and labeling and just like, fine, I hate whatever, this, choose your label or choose your country or city or whatever. But when you live there for a while, you go, oh, there's some really good people here. And there are some real stinkers of people here. That's just like where I grew up. How about that? That's an important lesson. And so I think travel is really important for having an informed view of the world, but space travel is one step further.
And so is intergalactic travel, but that's for another podcast.
Yeah, we'll maybe get there someday, but we don't have the engines for that yet, Leon.
No, Chris, I want to thank you a lot for agreeing to come onto this podcast. It was a beautiful conversation. A lot of the stuff that I do is kind of random. And I meet people that I don't know, and I'm on TV with them and blah, blah, blah. And I wanted to create a podcast where I had something like that as well. And this is a perfect example of how it can so beautifully just work, right? Because I really hope that everyone listening got something out of this, because I can tell you, if no one listens to this, which I hope they do, but if they don't, you made one English man living in Los Angeles very, very happy.
I'm glad. Not an Englishman in New York, an Englishman in LA. That's fine.
An Englishman in LA. And look, if you ever do find yourself in LA, please let me know. It would be an honor to stay in touch with you. Which part of Canada did you live in?
Near Toronto.
Okay.
Yeah,
Toronto.
so,
I know Toronto.
Yeah, not too far.
Thank you. What an honor.
My pleasure.
Thank you so much.
And one of the great delights is to meet somebody new who has both a curiosity, but also a desire to learn. To me, that's a successful day when you've had a chance to meet and discuss ideas with someone like that. So it's been a great pleasure for me as well, Leon. Nice to meet you, and I look forward to seeing you again.
Thank you so much, Chris.
Take care.
See you on Mars.
Maybe.
Hello, everyone. It's Leon here, aka the Kindness Guy. If you like my videos, which I hope you do, don't forget to press the subscribe button and also to ring the little bell so that the notifications notify you that I have a new video out in the world.